Hello, my name is Chris, and welcome to The Left Speaks, where we defend progressive positions and attempt to honestly engage with conservative callers. Phone lines are open now. Anybody is welcome to call in. You can present your case. If you have evidence, we'll look at that, bring it up on screen for everybody to see, same as I do for the left position, for the liberal or the progressive position. Phone lines are open, 855-915-5338. 815-915-5338. Left, for those of y'all who still use a phone to spell. Today we're going to talk about a couple of things, and as normal, phone lines are open to anybody who wishes to discuss the previous episode's topics or today's topics. The biggest concern to me right now is Donald Trump continuously floating the idea that he can have more than 2 terms, something that we passed an amendment against, passed a law against after President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Something that both sides agreed was not a good idea for one man to remain in power that long. It began as jokes. Maybe I should have a term after the 8 years. You know, if we change the rules, because under the current rules, we can't do that. But we can look at it a little bit. And then it's continued throughout the years. Throughout these 4 years, will you commit to a peaceful transition of power? Well, you know, ballots are a problem. If we didn't have ballots, we wouldn't have to worry about it. And don't worry about me misquoting him. We'll get to the direct quotes here in a minute. We're going to pull it up on screen for everybody to see. And any conservatives out there are more than welcome to call in and give their feedback. But from where I'm sitting, this is something that both sides agreed was not a good idea. It used to simply be a tradition that a president simply didn't run after having 2 full terms in office. And then Franklin Roosevelt changed that. A man who by most standards would at least be on the top 5 or top 10 list of all American presidents, of the greatest of all time. A man who brought us out of the Great Depression, a man who led us all the way through World War II, ultimately defeating Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. I don't care which side of the spectrum you live on politically. I don't think anything Donald Trump has accomplished or not accomplished remotely measures up to those 2 things. Even if you didn't like the man's policies and everything else, besides a few really out there neo-Nazis, I think most people would agree that he did a good job leading us through World War II. And if that man, after he passed away, wasn't a good enough example, wasn't a great enough example of a president for us to say, you know, that whole 2-term tradition, maybe, just maybe, it was a tradition, and if we get the right guy, we should let it keep going. If Franklin Roosevelt wasn't good enough, then I don't think anybody is. And both sides, after he passed, agreed on that and said, you know, we don't want a kingdom of the United States, whether it's elected or not. So 2 terms, that's it. But let's go see some of the things that this president in a very ununified country has had to say about that. We'll start with a quick synopsis over the years.
Under the normal rules, I'll be out in 2024, so we may have to go for an extra term.
Hey, we're going to have to extend my 2nd term because 2026, I'm going to have to extend it for a couple of years. I don't think any of you would have a problem with that. I was going to joke, General, say at least for 10 or 14 years, but we would cause bedlam if I said, we go to 20, we go to 24. Did you see it? Then it says 28.
32, 36, 40, 44. He's now president for life. And look, he was able to do that. I think it's great. Maybe we'll have to give that a shot someday. So we have 16, we have 20, we have 24. And you know what's very interesting, though? There are really people out there who think I'm not leaving. Can you believe it? Hey, maybe that is a good idea. Let's think.
There are really people out there who think I'm not leaving. Okay, sure, some of those were jokes. But a lot of things that are said in jest also contain a measure of truth. If you keep joking about something, people start wondering about what you actually believe. You know that guy at your work that's always looking around over his shoulders and telling you the really bad racist jokes? You know, at some point, first few times you laugh it off, right? Okay, maybe that was a little off color. But he's a nice enough guy. But at some point, when he keeps joking about it, and it's the same joke over and over and over on the same topic about how this color of people is bad, you kind of start to wonder just a little bit if maybe he believes some of this stuff. And I don't know any American that cares to follow China's lead on very many things, including having a president for life. Because, you know, China, communist China, had elections, right? But I don't think there's very many of us out there that think that those are the kind of elections that we want over here. And when that's constantly what you bring up in your jokes, and then after you're done joking, you don't go, yeah, but I know the law says that I've got 2 terms, so hopefully we can accomplish everything in those 2 terms that we need to accomplish. It would take a lifetime to accomplish everything I want to accomplish for this country. But we've only got 8 years tops, so we need to get on it now. Hey, if you told a joke and then said a message like that, I could understand. But that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with China has a president for life. Maybe we should try that out over here. That doesn't seem like such a bad idea. And some of those interviews were dated. So let's go to something more recent. This is from this campaign season.
In 78 days, we're going to stop the radical left. We are going to win the state of Wisconsin, and we are going to win 4 more years. And then after that, we'll go for another 4 years because, you know what, they spied on my campaign. We should get a redo of 4 years.
They spied on my campaign. I won anyway. We can go into the details of how and why and the evidence supporting that in a different episode. But I won anyway. And there's no exception in the law, at least none that I'm aware of, that says if you didn't like the way the campaign went, you get an extra term or you get to run again. But since I didn't like the way the campaigns were handled, I can run for a 3rd term. Explain to me how this doesn't get used every election. That's what I'm curious about. Because whether we like it or not, I think both sides can agree here that dirty politics exists on both sides. And both elections, both campaigns, engage in some underhanded tactics. And both sides quite literally have a reason to be upset at every campaign that they ever run in terms of what the opposition did to them. Remember when Bush and Kerry ran against each other? And the attack ads talking about how he was a coward in Vietnam that were later debunked and discredited? I guess Kerry should get a redo. I mean, how far back do you want to go on this to just keep letting people run? Remember all the attacks against Bill Clinton? There's stuff he didn't like about his campaign and the things that the opposition said about him. I guess he should get to run again. This shouldn't be a left or right issue. Like I said, there was a time when we all agreed on this. That's how it passed into law. We're not the ones turning it political. It's not those of us on the left that are turning it political. Hell, it's not even those of us on the right. It's specifically Donald Trump. Now, to go back to the "it's just a joke" crowd, because that's how some people are going to explain this off. Oh, you hear the laughs in the background. Oh, he's just saying it to his supporters that are cheering, even though they don't believe it's true. They don't think he'll really run again. He's just saying that for the crowd. He shouldn't have to come out and say why it was a joke, or come out and explain his position like I did, where I said it would take a lifetime to accomplish what I want to accomplish as president, but we've only got 2 terms. He shouldn't have to do that. Y'all are just blowing this out of proportion. Those people on the left are just being crazy and insane. I'm going to show you a clip because this has gone back for a long time. This goes back before the founding of America, before American democracy.
You all did see that under Lupercal, I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition?
Now, why am I showing you a clip of Shakespeare about Julius Caesar after his death? Because we started writing about testing the waters of an elected ruler becoming a dictator as far back, at least as far back, as Shakespeare, which predates the founding of this country. Now, the context for that clip is Julius Caesar had just returned to Rome. And in front of the massive crowds, the Roman mob, the Roman people, had his friend and fellow senator place the crown on his head. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. And when they would start to place the crown on his head, the crowd would boo. And then when they would take it away, the crowd would cheer. Now, a smart politician knows that he's testing the water to see how the crowd's going to react. All it takes is for them to cheer when they're putting the crown on his head one time, and he's got the support of the people. And we all know how Caesar ended up being a dictator. The beginning of the fall of the Roman Republic. Something that American society at least drew some inspiration from. And you can go back to Shakespeare pointing out how they were testing the waters of ending a republic. Jokes can be used that way, and not everything that he said was said in jest. Some of it, sure. Some of it he was laughing for. Some of it was saying to his own people, hey, I should get more than 8 years. We should run for a third term and a fourth. And you notice the pause to see how people are going to react? That's the important part. We want to see how you're going to react. We're going to see if you're okay with this. And if you think I'm blowing this all out of proportion still, let's go to his most recent clip on how we would do a peaceful transition of power if he wasn't elected, because that hasn't been determined yet. But if he wasn't elected, would he at least commit to a peaceful transition of power? You know, something every American president and every American presidential candidate has done. Because it's what our democracy is based on. But again, I don't need to speak for the man. Let's let the man speak for himself.
Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
Get rid of the ballots, and you won't have to worry about a peaceful transition of power. You're right. You won't have to worry about being a democracy anymore either, but you won't have to worry about any transitions of power. Just get rid of the ballots. That's the solution here. Those of us on the left, those of us who disagree with Trump, hell, even the conservatives that disagree with Trump, we're listening to what the man says. We're looking at the speeches that he makes. We're listening to the words. And we're pointing at the parallels. We're not adding extra context. We're not explaining away what he's actually saying. I'm literally listening to him. I personally went and researched this clip and listened to the whole interview process. It doesn't get any better. But then the next day, hey, that's not what I meant. Testing the waters. I'm just going to put a finger in. See how cold it is. Going to keep floating this idea that I've been floating the entire presidency, my entire first term. So that way it becomes some normal part of American discourse. Just think about it, especially those that disagree with me. When was the last time you and I, left and right, progressive and conservative, would have had this conversation? We didn't have it under George Bush, the first. We didn't have it under Bill Clinton. Y'all hated Clinton, and I've got my issues with the man. But hell, after 2 terms, you knew it was done. We didn't have it under George Bush the second. Obviously, you know I didn't like him. I'm very clear about where I stand. But we didn't have this conversation. We didn't have it under Obama. Oh, y'all hated Obama. There was all kinds of conspiracy theories going around. Obama's going to turn himself into a dictator, but he never said that. It wasn't Obama coming out and saying, hey, you know, I should run for a 3rd term. I know it's not exactly legal. But I didn't like the way they ran that first campaign against me. That makes it okay, right? You never had Obama at the end of his first term saying, hey, if I lose, we're going to have to look at it and see whether, you know, I'm going to hand the keys over or not. That's not what happened. Why are you defending it this time? This is my biggest problem with a lot of the conservatives I talk to. Because from where I'm sitting, I've been consistent the whole time. My entire political life. Since I was old enough to recognize what politics were, I've been consistent. And hell, for a while there, y'all were too. But once again, just like with the Supreme Court vacancy, we're not the ones trying to change the rules here. And we're not the ones trying to change the rules without even talking to you guys. Because when we decided as a nation that we didn't want presidents to rule for life, even if they were elected every time, we both talked back and forth and decided it was a good idea. It wasn't one side or the other just jamming it down the other side's throat. I don't think it's unfair for me to want to know what the rules are. If you and I sit down and agree to play a game, be it football or baseball or whatever, one side doesn't get to change it midway through just because it benefits them. I'm from Louisiana originally, right? LSU was pretty damn good last year as a college football team. I would say the best ever, but obviously I'm biased, and that's not what the show's about. But LSU doesn't get to decide, hey, you know, we had a pretty good team last year. We should pay all those people to come back. Yeah, we're not ready to let them go, but we don't want to lose them to the NFL because obviously the LSU football program brings in a lot of money. So, you know, since we won last year, there was that one game where we didn't like what people were saying about us. So, you know, we should get another season. Yeah, let's just We're going to pay and bring everybody back. That's what we're going to do. There's not going to be any of our players peacefully transitioning to the NFL here. We're going to have to look at that because it doesn't benefit us. So that star quarterback we got that's now part of the Cincinnati Bengals, yeah, come on home, Joe. We got to go for round 2, baby. What do you guys mean out there that we can't do that? They didn't play fair the first time. There was a couple of calls that the refs made that we disagree with. So we want a do-over. Even though we won, we want a do-over. No, it doesn't matter that the rest of the college football teams out there don't think it's fair. It doesn't matter that usually the rules are determined by all of us getting together and deciding what they are. You don't understand. This benefits my team. And I'm going to support my team no matter what. This is why the left has problems talking to conservatives right now. Because it looks like you're prioritizing your team winning over anything else. Over rules that we'd all agreed to on the way this democracy is supposed to function. And it looks like you're only doing it because that's your team. Now, to be fair, the second issue we're going to dive into a little bit here is the reason, supposedly, that Trump is talking about not honoring the election. And that's because of mail-in voter fraud being such a problem that you can't trust the ballots. Now I remind you that he's been joking about this, as we showed in the video, for 4 years. So this isn't some new topic that he came up with because of COVID. COVID-19 seems to be a rather convenient excuse. But he was joking about this and putting his foot in the water well before we started talking about having to run a mail-in election. But in the interest of fairness, I read what conservatives send me on my own personal Facebook, on the Facebook page for the show here. I do look at the articles y'all post. And one of the most interesting ones I got, I'll be happy to share with y'all. As you can see from the pop-up, defend conservative journalism, PJ Media. Now, I had absolutely never heard of PJ Media. This was shared on a friend of mine, a personal friend of mine's Facebook. And we did speak back and forth about this because I believe in both sides talking to each other. But this was shared on a personal friend of mine's Facebook. A guy who's pretty much a pro-Trump supporter. Military ballots found in the trash in Pennsylvania. All of them were Trump votes. Now, the little picture here is what you see on Facebook. And I mean, that looks like it could be 100 or so ballots. Major problem. Could be a major issue anyhow. So I click on the little thumbnail because, well, I haven't seen any evidence that mail-in ballots are more fraudulent than in person or have ever been a problem, I'm open to new evidence changing my mind. And this seems like it could, potentially. So let's just do a quick cursory scroll down this thing and see what we've got. Mail-in ballots from overseas were found in the trash in Pennsylvania. They were discovered during an investigation. They were all ballots for Trump. Okay, that's a problem. It does look like foul play on the face of it. I mean, we've got, I don't know, let's go conservative here, 100 ballots. And then let's go liberal here, because we like to overestimate everything, apparently, and say that that's, 350, 400, 500 ballots. And if they're all Trump ballots, that's a problem. So let's keep going down and looking and seeing what we've got. Nine ballots. Okay, so the photo at the top obviously is a stock footage or something that this media, and I use that term as loosely as possible, media source came up with. But we've got 9 ballots. Investigators have recovered 9 ballots. Now, 9 here, 9 there. You could start to add up. I can see that argument. Okay? But let's not pretend like these 9 ballots are going to swing the election. But it gets better. Since Monday, FBI personnel have been investigating this. Okay, so here's where I'm coming from, and those of us on the left and in the progressive position. Nobody thinks that democracy is literally perfect and that ballots are literally perfect, because people aren't perfect. People make mistakes. Things get dropped. People have ulterior motives. Maybe this was somebody that was trying to swing the election by hiding 9 ballots and throwing them in the trash. Again, not the several hundred pictured beforehand and that you see when you look at the headline when your friend shares this photo. But if we're going to literally have the FBI involved in a case as small as 9, how much more seriously do you want us to be taking this? If your best example of mail-in voter fraud that should have me up in arms and against mail-in voting entirely is 9 ballots where the FBI is already called in to investigate, do you see why it's hard for me and my side to take you seriously? It'd be like if you were running a convenience store and you told me constantly that the reason that this store wasn't profitable was because of all the shoplifting. The store could be successful, but there's just too much shoplifting. And I say, okay, I'm new here. I don't know. What should I be looking out for? Well, you just can't sell anything. we can't run business as usual because there's too much shoplifting. Well, how are we supposed to be a successful convenience store, aka a successful democracy, if we don't sell anything or use ballots, to continue the analogy? Well, we just can't do it right now because there's too much shoplifting. Do you have any examples of this shoplifting? Oh, yeah, there's tons of them, but we're getting them together for you. Okay. I don't believe you. I'm going to keep running my convenience store. Oh, we found one. We found one. Here's photographic evidence of this guy, we don't know who, stealing a pack of gum. Well, pack of gum, I mean, that could add up. Okay, I could see it. What's going on with it? Oh, well, the FBI is investigating it. And you're telling me I should shut down my store because you can point to one guy stealing a pack of gum and the FBI is already involved? I mean, it seems to me like we're doing, this is the system functioning the way it's supposed to. You're telling me I should shut down my election because 9 ballots got lost or intentionally discarded. I won't take that off the table because I don't know, but neither do you. And the FBI is already investigating. Now, to go into the facts and evidence that my side is looking at, we start with a very simple question. Is mail-in voting a problem? Now, to me, it would seem to be the obvious answer is no. We've had it for tons of elections. We've done it for the majority of the male population during World War II when they were serving overseas. We still do it today for all of our military service members. If you noticed on the previous article, those were military ballots that were lost. All 9 of them that the FBI is again investigating. So why is this now a problem? Again, we've scaled this system up before. What are we missing here? Okay, so is mail-in fraud, mail-in voter fraud, a problem? That's the question that somebody like myself would start with. Just because President Trump comes out and says it is, doesn't mean it is. He could come out tomorrow and say the sky is green. That doesn't mean it's green, but I'll at least look and see if the sky is green that day. Okay? So, let's go see. Let's try an overseas source. They're not left or right? So we'll go to the BBC, okay? Because, you know, Trump complains about the fake news all the time. So let's see. In the 2016 election, 1/4 of votes were cast by the mail. They call it the post over there. Okay. So again, this isn't something that we've done a few 100,000 of, scattered across the country. This isn't something that would break the system, or at least it hasn't been before. So, okay. There are 6 states planning to hold all mail ballot elections this November. California, Utah, Hawaii, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. Some of those are purplish states, red or blue. Some of those, California, for instance, are obviously blue. Utah, however, I couldn't tell you the last time I remember Utah, electing a Democrat. Utah is solidly red and has been like as far back as you want to go. So again, it hasn't been a progressive or conservative issue until Trump decided to make it one. Is there evidence of fraud? Numerous nationwide and statewide studies over the years have not revealed evidence of major widespread fraud. There have been isolated cases, and then here's the sources that it cites. 0.00004% on the conservative end of things to 0.0009%. If you thought my analogy about losing a stick of gum to store theft was off, you might be right, because that would probably be a higher profit loss percentage for the month than the percentages of fraud that we're looking at here. If anything, it seems I was too generous. Okay, but this is just a news site. Okay, they cite some sources in here. Okay, so let's go check those out. This group has run reports on this for years, well before President Trump, mind you. This includes in person. 0.0025%. If you want me to take voter fraud seriously, you need to point out it's an issue. You need to point to something. Because from what I'm looking at right now, all the data I've got, everything that I'm seeing, you might as well be saying that space aliens are coming to vote in our elections. And that they're going to change it. They're going to decide who wins. So it's really important that we all wear tinfoil hats to go to the polls so that the space aliens can't tell me how to vote. And then I say, why do you believe this? Where's the evidence? What should I be concerned about? And you go, oh, I'll get back to you on that. Show me where I'm wrong. Show me the evidence of widespread voter fraud. If you want me to take you seriously, show me the damned evidence. If you don't want to be equated with the guy that thinks that space aliens are going to tell him how to vote, then you need to point to something that shows me that this is a real problem. Because I don't think the space aliens are a problem, and you don't think the space aliens are a problem. Why? Because neither one of us sees any evidence of that. Well, I don't believe that voter fraud is a problem, and all the evidence I'm seeing says that it's not. You do believe that voter fraud is a problem. In both cases, I'm basing my position on the evidence and the facts and the data. What in the hell are you basing your evidence on besides the fact that your team, your guy, is telling you that it's a problem? If he came out tomorrow and said you needed to go to the ballots with a tinfoil hat on to protect yourself from the space aliens so you didn't accidentally vote Democrat, would you believe him? Or would you pause for a minute? And go look at the facts. And that's literally all my side is asking you to do. This man is not your Jesus. He's not your God. He's not your Allah. He's a person. And even if you like the guy, he can be wrong. So what evidence in this case on this question makes you think that he's right? Or are you just going to blindly follow him no matter what he does? Now, one of his specific claims, again, to be generous, because I'm trying to be generous here, goes specifically back to him talking about 1 million illegal votes cast in the 2016 presidential election. Literally everywhere I look says this is false. Hell, you can go specifically to the PDF lawsuit itself in the 20-page document and notes that all parties are saying that there's no admission of liability or wrongdoing. It also makes no mention of voter fraud or illegal voting. So if I go to the damn court documents of the case that Trump is telling me to look at that proves 1 million fraudulent votes were cast in 2016 in the state of California, if I take him at face value and then I go look, how in the hell can a document that makes zero mention of voter fraud be your proof of voter fraud? You know what else this document makes zero mention of? Space aliens. If a document that makes zero proof, zero mention of voter fraud can be his proof of voter fraud, something the document specifically does not mention, then it can be my proof that it's not voter fraud you need to worry about. It's the space aliens telling you to vote Democrat. Now I'm going to tell you the same thing I would tell the guy that I saw at the polls wearing a tinfoil hat. Take off your tinfoil hat for a minute. Quit listening to everything people tell you. Quit listening to what people tell you, even when you agree with them or think you do, because people can be wrong. Go research it for yourself. Go look into the issue. See if you can find evidence of this widespread voter fraud claim. See if you can find evidence that mail-in votes are more likely to be fraudulent than in-person voting. Instead of letting people tell you what to believe. It's a little more work, but you can actually go look and do 5 minutes of research, 5 minutes of Googling, 10 minutes on Facebook, just scrolling on your phone. and saying, I wonder. These people are telling me this. I wonder if that's true. I wonder what supports it. I'm not asking you to believe me because I'm up here sitting on a stage telling you. I'm just asking you to look at the damned evidence. That's all I'm asking. When you go to cross the road, what's the first thing you do that you're told from the time you're a child? The same thing I tell my kid all the time. And he's gotten better at it, but he's still not even 5 yet, right? Look both ways. Now, what does that mean? It means check and look for evidence that there's not a car that's about to run you over. Don't just run out there because the person in front of you thought it was safe. Don't just run out there because grandma calls you from across the street. Stop and check the evidence yourself. And then decide whether you believe it's safe or not. You've primarily got two sides in this country. Primarily, right? It's a spectrum. Okay, you got your real far left over here, and you got your real far right neo-Nazis over here, and your full-blown communists, whatever. Okay. Stop and look at both sides, because they're both going to be putting out their information. And more importantly, look at the evidence for yourself. This is a lesson that we learn as children at a most basic physical level. Is there a car? Is there not a car? Can I go that way, or should I stand right here? The same thing applies to political decisions. Is there voting fraud? Is there not voting fraud? Can we keep doing things the way we've been doing? Or should we go over there and stop doing things the way we've been doing? Again, I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm willing to look at sources of supposed voter fraud. I know the 9 ballot thing seems like something that I found the worst possible argument I could find for. I promise it's not. It was shared literally yesterday or the day before. I read it. It's not my fault that the headline misled you when you shared it. It's your fault that you didn't stop to read beyond the headline. It's not my fault that 9 ballots is trivial, and even with as small as it is, we're literally investigating it with the FBI, so we're taking it extremely seriously, which I support, by the way. But if that's the best example you've got to prove that voter fraud is an issue, dude, I can find 9 people in a room and interview them all that say that they were abducted by aliens. I mean, you got to prove something more than this for me to take you seriously. I mean, I can YouTube some videos of some things moving around in the clouds and then say the Air Force is investigating it. You got to have more. And if this is enough for you to take it seriously, if this is all it takes for you to take it seriously, I would really love to hear from you and know why this is serious to you, but the alien thing isn't. Because I don't see a way to differentiate between the two. I'm asking you to do the same thing that your parents taught you when you were a little kid. Stop. Look both ways. And look for evidence of the car. Before you decide whether you're going to stand on this side of the road or whether you need to go over there. We're going to take a short break, folks. That's all I've got for today. We'll be back in a minute, see if we have any callers, and continue on from there. I thank you for listening to me. Yeah, I'm still getting down this mute and unmute function. Looks like we have one caller coming in from Louisiana. Give me just a minute and you'll be on the air. Caller, you are now on the air. Thank you for calling.
Thank you for having me. One of the things that I wanted to bring up for everybody to take a look at is just a while back we had all the stuff that was concerned about voter fraud because President Trump had put in a new postmaster general.
Yes.
And they were getting rid of a lot of machines that were supposed to be able to, make it easier for them to count, mail-in voter, ballots, and they were getting rid of it. They were getting rid of those machines, and there was a lot of concern about the fact that they wouldn't be able to do a very good job of counting the votes. And I found it very interesting that when they got caught doing this, and it looks like, Trump's group was trying to do voter fraud, he put that man in office, to be the postmaster general. And then when the voting stuff, machines started disappearing, the voter counting machines, and then the post office people started making all these concerns about they weren't going to keep up with everything for the election. Then it all came out, and then they started getting investigated. Next thing we know, when it looks like they're the ones trying to control the election, then all of a sudden Trump turns around and says there's voter fraud on the other side now.
Well,
I just think that's a whole big diversion cover-up for what he did, what it looks like to me.
he's been claiming voter fraud for a while since this was a thing. And then he put his postmaster general in office. And what they specifically did was a lot of the major cities, right, LA, places that get a lot of mail, have mail sorting machines because it just simply takes too long to do it by hand when you're talking thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of pieces of mail, right? That's why you got the little barcodes on the envelopes and a lot of them so they can just, shoot through the machines just like at a factory. Well, they just dismantled a lot of them for no apparent reason. I think the reason they given was that they were going to upgrade them, but of course the upgrade wasn't going to come until after election time. So again, I tend to agree with you. It's, hey, there's a problem over here. Nobody sees any potential problem. When you look at all the evidence that I can find, there wasn't a problem, but by damn, we can create one. We can make sure that it's not possible for you to send it in by mail. And those machines have not been reassembled, to my knowledge. They have not been put back into place. It's the reason that the Democrats and the progressive left are saying if you're going to vote by mail, either vote extremely early or take your ballot that you filled out at your house and go to one of the election polling stations and drop it off, because you can do that as well. So if you want to make sure it gets counted, make sure you get it in either ridiculously early because the mail and the postal service is way behind as a result of that, or dropping it off. Me personally, I'm probably going to drop it off.
Well, the other thing that I had read too was they were saying that most of these machines that had been taken apart had been in mostly states that usually vote high Democrat.
Yeah, well, it's not even necessarily the state that votes high Democrat. It's areas in particular states that vote high Democrat. So, for instance, Pennsylvania is a battleground state, and I don't know the specifics off the top of my head, so I'm just using it as a generic example. But normally we know that urban areas tend to vote, Democrat, and rural areas tend to vote Republican. So if I dismantle the machines in Philadelphia, right, well, then that's going to decrease the number of liberal or progressive or Democrat votes that are counted for that state. And yeah, there was an admission of that. I'll make sure to have it ready for the next episode.
Well, the other thing is, won't that throw the Electoral College off too?
That's the point. So if I can suppress the Democratic vote in a battleground state, and I know where most Democrats live, so I can just suppress all of those votes. Like say Philadelphia goes 80%, Democrat and 20% Republican. Well, if I suppress all those votes or just flat don't count them, right? Well, I lose 20% of what I would normally get, but the Democrats lose 80% of what they would normally get. So that's a huge win for me. So that was kind of the intent, and the goal is to suppress a lot of those areas, or at least that's what it looks like. And it's...
Remind me if I'm correct.
Go ahead.
Remind me if I'm correct. I think the last couple of elections, the Republicans have won because of the Electoral College, not because of the general vote.
No, you're correct.
People, but they've won for the Electoral College. So they're, of course, planning to win by Electoral College again. well, if this would totally mess up the Electoral College and throw it in their favor, well, sure, they'd do that because then they'd win, and then they can legally get back in office and saying they won legally. But what they've really done is tamper with the votes to such an extent that it has messed up the Electoral College from even being fair at all, and the votes that should have counted didn't. So they're sitting here screaming voter fraud now as Republicans, but they're the ones who looked at me. They started bringing all this voter fraud up. They were the ones trying to defraud everybody, and now they're screaming voter fraud, I think, to distract and cover up what they did as true voter fraud.
No, I tend to agree with you. But it's been a Republican, not national platform, but at different areas, it's been a pretty consistent Republican plan to suppress the vote, because when more people vote, the election tends to go Democrat. That's not 100% true for every area. And again, I'll have data ready for the next episode to share, but there's a reason that polling stations get closed constantly in urban environments, because they tend to vote more Democrat. And if the state, legislature is Republican, well, they just won't hold as many polling places there. We're just taking that same logic and applying it to mail-in voting essentially now, because not only can I dismantle the machines in the rural or in the urban areas and suppress the Democratic vote, but the majority of my supporters, if I'm a conservative, don't take coronavirus and the pandemic nearly as seriously. So they're much more likely to show up and vote in person. So I hit the Democrats twice if I, make mail-in voting difficult or impossible. There's also, even more troubling, been talk on the from the Trump campaign. I don't believe it was from Trump himself, but from the Trump campaign, about how states can actually elect their own electoral voters that vote in the Electoral College. And in a lot of states, there's no requirement that state's electoral votes go to the candidate that the people voted for. So, for instance, we can use Pennsylvania again, and I don't know for sure that it's Pennsylvania, but even let's make it ridiculous. Let's say that the voters picked Joe Biden by 60%. Well, the Electoral College is, for the state of Pennsylvania, those people that cast those votes for the Electoral College are not legally obligated to vote 60-40 for Joe Biden. They can vote for whoever the hell they want. So if the Republicans control that legislature, they can say, hey, actually, my buddy's a conservative. We're just going to send him up there and he'll vote Trump. So Trump could get 100% of the votes in a particular instance. So a lot of states don't have.
How can that be legal?
Because originally, when the Electoral College was designed back in the founding of the country, it was basically a check on mob rule. Was how it was designed. So the founding fathers were essentially worried about a true democracy, right? So they wanted a check to keep a totally populist candidate from getting in there. And the goal was, and again, you're going back to when states were a lot more important, right? And only, white men with land could vote, right? That this would be a check on people just essentially buying the election or being popular. It was essentially trying to be a check on a Julius Caesar position, where somebody could get so popular with the crowds that the crowds would vote for him regardless of whether it was good for the country or not. We've obviously expanded our definition of democracy and who gets to vote and how the system works since then, but a lot of those laws are still on the books and have never been updated. A lot of states have updated them, but a lot of them have not.
Okay. Well, it makes some sense that maybe we need to be looking at some of that.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things that's just never been an issue before now. Just like how some states still have, laws regarding which positions you can have sex in still on the books, but nobody enforces them, right? This is one of those things where it's, it's never been a problem before because nobody's tried to go around the popular vote before or even floated the idea, we're running into that same wall again. There's a lot of things that we've taken as, norms for our democracy, like you can only run for 2 terms, that are being challenged again without any legal support behind it. Well, in this case, there is some legal support for those positions. It might be 200 years out of date, but there's still those laws on the books, so there might be a way to do it. And like I said, don't hold me. It's not. I don't think it's Pennsylvania in specific, but there are other states that are in question where that's the case. And I'll probably do something on the Electoral College and which states are obligated to vote and which ones aren't, based on the will of their people and the votes their people cast next week.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in hearing some of that too, because I'm really getting concerned about the election. I'm getting more and more concerned about the fact that we're giving up our democracy. I've been reading stuff from overseas. There was a poll that was done on 13 different countries. Okay. It was on the internet this last week, and it's a poll of 13 different countries, and they were from all over the place. I mean, they went to Canada and Mexico and Cambodia, and Germany, and just all these different places, and a lot of small countries, just everywhere. And they were talking about how they couldn't understand why the American people were acting the way they were. They couldn't understand how it looked like, we're just basically willing to give up our democracy. Germany was very concerned about our not seeing the fact of how we're giving up our democracy so much with what's going on with Trump, and the concern about, they're so worried about that because years ago when they gave up their democracy, and Hitler came to power and all that kind of stuff. And so they're wanting us to really take a look at everything that's going on. And there's just a lot of different issues. There's a lot of people that were saying also that we are a first-rate nation and we're acting like a third world country, quote unquote. And there was just a lot of different things that were coming in, and they were feeling like they'd been left abandoned on the international stage because we were the ones that always showed, the ones who they looked up to see how to do democracy, how to become a democratic nation and how to do all these things. And now they just feel like we just deserted them because we're no longer very much on the international stage anymore, and they looked up to us so much, and they wonder what in the world's going on over here, why Americans are just willing to give up their democracy. And there's just a lot of things that people need to look at what's being said internationally and get out of their own little bubble and look at the things that are concerning people all over the world about us right now. And they're feeling sorry for American people because we've handled the coronavirus so poorly, and they just don't understand what's wrong with us over here. And so it starts making you wonder, what is wrong with us over here? It's so plain to them from the outside looking at us. They have a better view, I think, than what we do. We can't see the forest of trees sometimes in this country, and we need to look at what people sometimes outside this country are saying that are really concerned about us and paying attention to what's going on more than we have been.
No, I agree with a lot of that. I think at a basic level that we're in a time when capitalism is not serving the majority of this country. When you look at the fact that, the stock market has continued to go up and up and up and up and up, but the majority of Americans don't own stock. And the wages have pretty much stayed frozen. They certainly haven't remotely kept pace with the stock market since, the 70s. So just like Germany prior to the 1930s was dealing with the Depression, I mean, we've gone through a really rough recession in the last 15, 20 years. We're looking at one again, right down the throat. The average American is pissed, right? I mean, that's just, they don't feel like their government's serving them. They feel like neither side is doing anything that they need, okay? And they believe in capitalism because it has its good points. And, it encourages, innovation and when there's competition, and, it can do a lot of good things, but it's not serving the average American right now. And instead of being able to point at the systems we've got in place and say, hey, maybe we should tweak this or tweak that, or regulate this or regulate that. The answer from the majority on both sides just seems to be, let the free market do its thing. And we did that before in the past in the 20s, and that's kind of what led to the Great Depression. So you've got somebody coming from the outside, and again, a lot of people in this country are pissed at the people that have been in government for ages because they're not being served. And you got somebody coming from the outside saying, no, It's the people coming from Mexico. It's the brown people stealing your jobs. They're also all criminals and rapists, but they're stealing your jobs. And they're just pointing at somebody else as the problem. And I think a large part of this country has, at least on some level, recognized that there is a problem, that, you know, this generation is not doing as well as its parents' generation before it. And that, you know, that we just keep going through recession after recession, and that wages are not keeping up with cost of living, and that, you know, a lot of people in the older age group or the middle age group were doing better 15, 20 years ago than they are right now today, you know, and that their parents were doing better than they are, and that they're still doing better than their children. So this doesn't seem to be going in the right direction. So they recognize there's a problem, but they can't quite put their finger on what. And then you've got a guy that comes in and says, it's all those people over there. And whoever you define those people as doesn't really matter. It gives it gives the average person that's pissed off somebody to point at and say, yeah, let's get them. And Trump seems to have settled on two groups. It's the left and the liberals, and it's immigrants. And there's a lot of people that bought that, either entirely or one or the other. And it is scary.
Well, it's displacement of anger.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're very angry and they have good reasons to be angry, but then it's displacement of anger. It's not looking at the real issues and problems. It's just finding a way to divert it and displace it elsewhere, so it's not placed on the people it needs to be placed on, which are the leaders of this country who are not leading. Okay? And we need to get down to solving the issues and leading. That's one of the things I was reading when they were talking about overseas stuff I was reading. They were saying, where's the leadership? Where's the leadership for the United States of America? Where's the leadership that the United States used to even provide internationally? That was a top leader. There was great leadership in the United States, and they're saying there is no leadership in the United States right now. Well, from their standpoint of looking from outside, looking in, I kind of agree. You know, where's our leadership? 200,000 people are dead from coronavirus. We have all these problems that aren't really getting resolved. And it's, you know, where's the leadership? Where's the leadership? Well, just now there's a problem because, you know, we don't have to deal with it. No matter what the problem is, we'll deny it and we'll just place your anger over here. You can be angry at these people or whatever. But isn't that exactly what Hitler did?
I mean, it's just, you get people, you get people, yeah, you can get people scared, and you can point at somebody else and say they're the problem. I mean, Trump talks all the time about the radical left, right? But there's nobody, no serious political candidate in this country that's talking about, you know, if you elect me, we're going to seize the means of production. Okay. It's not like, you know, we're going to nationalize entire industries. Nobody's even discussing that. You know, nobody's talking about disarming the police departments. Okay. Everybody agrees that the police have a right to defend themselves. We might not think that, you know, they need all the money they're getting, and some of these, you know, some of this money could go to other services that could provide a better service than the police. Like, why would the police need to go do a wellness check? We could send a nurse to do that. That would seem to be more, you know, you don't have to worry about grandma getting shot if she's, you know, there. You shouldn't need to send somebody armed to do a wellness check in the first place. But nobody's talking about disarming cops. Nobody's talking about nationalizing industries in this country. Nobody's talking about maximum wage that you can make like we were right after the Great Depression under Franklin Roosevelt. You know, where's this radical left that he wants to keep pointing at? It's just a boogeyman. And you're absolutely right. It's literally, we recognize that everybody's pissed. We recognize that everybody's upset. They don't know exactly why, so we're going to point to a reason. It doesn't matter whether it's factual or not. Just like the mail-in voter fraud, it doesn't matter whether it's factual or not. They won't bother to look it up. They're too lazy, or they're too busy, or they're too ignorant. And I can say whatever I want. Nobody's going to check me.
And that's pretty sad, really. You know, and the other thing I read recently was Mr. Ray, who's the head of the FBI, you know, in an interview, they were asking him, you know, where's the most of violence in the country coming from? You know, the terrorists, you know, outside terrorists outside the United States. And he said, no, we're getting about 1,000 calls on that a year, which is exactly what we've been getting called, getting calls for every year. The last few years, so that's not up from usual, and they're handling it as usual and everything, you know, right along as usual. And they were saying, well, then where's most of the violence coming from? We got violence in these demonstrations, we got all the different violence, where's it coming from? And he said, well, from what we've seen, he said, it's coming from the white supremacist group.
Yeah, it's the white nationalists.
Most of the violence is coming from. It's the white nationalists, and they want to point to everybody else in the country, but the white nationalists are the ones the FBI is saying that are causing the problem, and they know they go investigate this stuff, and it's the head of the FBI saying this, and nobody wants to hear that because the white nationalists support Trump.
Nobody wants to be on the same side as the Nazis. I mean, that's just the reality of it, and it's unfortunate when you are, you know. But I mean, that says more.
Yeah, but the Nazis and the swastika signs are showing up at Trump rallies. They're not showing up at the Biden rallies.
I know.
So, I mean, that tells me something that concerns me. Those are just things I think the American people need to hear and need to start looking into and saying, okay, well, you know, let's just look at this further. Don't take my word for it, like you said. Go look at this further. Go look these things up. Go look at this and start opening your eyes instead of staying in a bubble. And I was talking to somebody else yesterday, which I thought was a very interesting thing. And then I'll get off here, get some extra time, whatever. But I was talking to somebody yesterday that was saying that one of the things that they had been so concerned about 7 years ago, they started noticing and started saying that they did a lot of stuff on the internet, and they're internet savvy. And they said they started noticing that, you know, anytime you went and did a search on the internet for anything, then all of a sudden you started getting all kinds of things coming into your, you know, mailbox or whatever, trying to say, well, look at this and look at that. Like, say for instance, you're interested in a violin concert. Well, then next thing you know, you got 4 or 5 violin things coming to you. Okay, whatever it is you're looking at. Okay, they send it to you, So the deal is, like they said, this person started to have some concerns about that because it's like they're guiding your opinion on everything. If they see you look at one thing, well, they're going to send you tons of stuff on that, and you're going to be busy reading that, and then you're busy, you know, talking to your friends on Facebook about it, and they're sending you more stuff on that, and you're all, after a while, all you're looking at is what you already are interested in or what you already think. So nobody's ever challenging you to look at the bigger picture and see anything else.
Yes.
So let's look at a picture like violins, but, you know, you really might like to listen to somebody play an oboe or something else, but you don't ever get anything on that. You're going to get anything about. So the same thing is with politics. Whatever you're looking up, they're going to send you that. So if you're looking up right stuff or left stuff, they're going to continue to send you all the right or the left stuff, but you're never getting the other side of anything, so you're never getting a big picture for anything. So we get in a bubble, we stay in a bubble. This person was saying that they, you know, noticed that 7 years ago and started saying some of their concerns about that and how all these, you know, people who want to sell you stuff or media or whoever were guiding your opinions is making the country go more to extremes to the left or right and not so much talking about anything together, and everybody was getting in their little bubbles and staying in their extremes. And nobody really knew what was going on because there's so much misinformation, which used to be called propaganda, by the way. That's what propaganda is misinformation. All the propaganda that was going on, and it was like they were propagandizing you doing this to you. Well, it didn't necessarily start out as propaganda. It probably started off to sell you stuff, but it's become now, on top of selling you stuff, propaganda. So it's like, okay, if you're looking at only what you're being sent and you're not making an effort to get outside of your bubble and go completely other direction just to find out what is going on the other side of things and get the big picture, then you don't have a clue what's going on.
No, I agree entirely. It's way too easy to end up in your bubble. I mean, it goes back to the crossing the street analogy. I mean, you need to look both directions and make sure that there's not a car coming from either direction. And right now, if the Nazis are the car, they're showing up at the rallies on the right, like you said, but I don't see anybody showing up at a Biden rally waving, you know, the anarchist communist Soviet Union flags, and certainly not in the same numbers that you see at the conservative rallies. You know, the Nazis are a lot closer from the right now than the communists are from the left. At least from where I'm sitting and what I'm seeing.
Well, and I've been around for a long time and voted in a lot of elections because I'm more of an elder now. And in my life, never, ever have I ever seen Nazi swastikas at an election, at a rally, ever until this one.
Yeah.
And that concerns me. Why is it all of a sudden acceptable when it's never been acceptable before? It was never, ever acceptable before. Now it's acceptable. My question is, why are people willing to excuse that and consider that acceptable? When did being a Nazi become acceptable in this country? That's pretty scary to me.
I think if you ask most of them to their face, because I mean, I've got plenty of friends that are conservative. You know, they'll basically say, "Oh no, we don't agree with them," but they don't stop to look at how close and how far they've moved to the right from positions they probably held 5-10 years ago. I mean, like I said, when you start looking at the norms that we had that we're even talking about now and how far the conversation has moved, I mean, under Clinton, under Bush, under Bush Jr., under Obama, we weren't talking about whether there was going to be a peaceful transition of power.
No, never, ever. That's the first time I've ever heard this ever brought up in the entire course of history.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. This is how far the conversation has moved. And the people on the right, I understand you identify as conservative. I used to at some point too, years ago at this point, but I did. There's a reason I quit. And some of my positions, especially my economic positions, changed, as I educated myself more and learned more and grew up, right? But a lot of them have stayed the same. A lot of my positions have stayed the same. I didn't move on a lot of these issues. It's the conservative kept moving further and further and further right. And I understand that you identified as, a conservative or a Republican at some point. I mean, hell, I knocked on doors for George Bush Jr. the first time around, right? But damn, I mean, are you going to do that for Trump when he's trying to run for a third term? Are you going to do it when he's trying to run for a fourth term? Are you going to do it when he's trying to run for president for life? I mean, where's the line for you? Not you personally, but the individual in question. I mean, how far does it have to go before you say, you know what, I can't support that anymore?
Well, I know where it's drawing the line for me. It's drawing the line for me when Nazis are okay. That's a problem because the very extreme right is fascism. And
yes.
Fascism, of course, is Hitler. It's drawing the line for me there. You're going to be okay with dealing with Nazis and encouraging them? No, thank you. I'm not interested in going in that direction. And the other thing is if you want to be a dictator and you don't want to go by the laws and give up if you lose an election and gracefully step down and transition power, if you want to say, no, I'm just going to be a dictator, I'm going to keep taking 4 years after 4 years after 4 years, because by God, I'm going to take it because I can, that's a dictator. That's not a president. I'm done. I'm done with that. Because that is not what democracy is, and I'm a democratic capitalist. If you're not into democracy, then and you're in a democratic country, to me, you shouldn't be pulling the lever. If you're not going in and educating yourself on the responsibilities before you use your voter right to pull a lever, you need to be looking at what you're pulling a lever for. If you want to give up your democracy, that's up to you. I don't want to give up my democracy. I don't want to give up my rights. If you keep letting somebody come in there and tell you what they're going to do, like a dictator, then you're giving up your rights. Whether you admit it or not, you're giving up your rights. And why in the world would you give up your rights to somebody who doesn't even seem that extremely intelligent to me? I'm sorry, but I don't even see somebody who wants to deny that there's even a coronavirus problem. Somebody who wants to just sit there and no matter what it is, they want to wield it and twist it in their favor, whether it's getting another term or ballot fraud to mail in. Whatever else it is, if it's only going to serve him so he gets what he wants, what about the rest of us? That's not democracy. It's supposed to be government by the people, for the people, not for a dictator. And I feel like that's what we're getting. I'm done with it. And
I would hope that, and we'll end the call here, but I would hope that those two things that you listed, Nazis and trying to end democracy and becoming a dictator, even just floating those ideas, would be the line for everybody. I think that was an excellent way to put it. I mean, at a minimum, that should be the line for pretty much everybody.
People need to open up their eyes if they want to stay a democracy.
I agree entirely. I thank you for your call. We're going to wrap it up here. You are always welcome to call back in again.
Okay, appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye. And folks, that's going to conclude it for this episode. I appreciate everybody that called in and everybody that commented in chat and anybody that watches in the future. You are always welcome to call in. The lines open up 10 to 15 minutes before the show begins and maintain open throughout the entire time. If you are a conservative, say that in the screening process and you will get priority. Let me know who you are, where you're from, what your political affiliation is, and what you would like to discuss. If you have sources, you are more than welcome to tell me those sources or email them in if you want to get in line in advance, and we will address those directly. And I have no problem pulling them up and showing them on stream to everybody as long as they don't violate any of Facebook's terms of service. Obviously, I can't share Nazi stuff, right? Okay, but anything else, you've got the crazy Breitbart stuff out there or the Fox News stuff you want to share, or you think I'm showing only one side of the data, call in and present it. We don't hide from anything here. We just want to look at the evidence. I want you to look both ways before you cross the street to figure out whether you should or whether you shouldn't. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.